Judge Evelyn Parker stood before her bedroom mirror, meticulously adjusting her navy blue judicial robe. Her hands smoothed out the fabric, each movement deliberate and filled with purpose. Today, the robe felt especially heavy, as if it bore the weight of countless expectations and dreams of the community she served. Evelyn took a deep breath, her thoughtful brown eyes meeting her reflection. In her early 40s, her face bore the marks of wisdom earned through years dedicated to upholding justice. Another day, she whispered to herself, another opportunity to make a difference. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm hue across the room. Evelyn's gaze settled on a framed photograph on her dresser, a picture of her grandmother, a trailblazer in the women's suffrage movement decades ago. A gentle smile touched her lips, reminding her of the legacy she was proud to continue. As she gathered her briefcase, Evelyn's thoughts turned to the significant case awaiting her. It was a pivotal civil rights lawsuit that had the potential to set a new legal precedent. The responsibility weighed on her chest, a familiar yet sobering sensation. Descending the stairs, Evelyn's footsteps echoed softly in the quiet house. In the kitchen, she poured herself a cup of freshly brewed coffee, savoring the rich aroma. It was a brief moment of peace before the day's challenges began. Sitting at the kitchen table, Evelyn opened her briefcase and reviewed her notes one last time. The details of the case swirled in her mind, each fact and testimony crucial to the outcome. She thought about the individuals involved, the plaintiffs fighting for their rights, the defendants defending their actions, and the attorneys representing both sides. In her heart, she believed in fairness and impartiality for all. "Guide me today," Evelyn murmured softly, closing her eyes. "Let me serve with justice and compassion." Finishing her coffee, her determination solidified. She knew the day ahead would be demanding, filled with intense arguments and heartfelt testimonies, but Evelyn embraced her role, ready to stand as a beacon of fairness in a world that often struggled to achieve it. Gathering her belongings, Evelyn headed for the door. The crisp morning air greeted her as she stepped outside. She paused for a moment, taking in the quiet neighborhood. Most residents were still waking up or just beginning their day. But for Evelyn, the most important work of her life was about to commence. With a steady breath, she walked to her car, prepared to face whatever the day might bring. The significance of her position as a judge, as a woman of color in a role of authority, and as a guardian of justice, rested firmly on her shoulders. Yet, Evelyn Parker stood resolute, her spirit unbroken and her commitment unwavering. Officer Michael Blake stood at attention outside the bustling downtown courthouse, his crisp navy blue uniform contrasting sharply with the grand marble steps beneath his feet. At 28, Michael was one of the newer officers in the Metropolitan Police Department, his enthusiasm evident in every precise movement. His eyes scanned the crowd with a vigilance that sometimes bordered on overzealousness. "First day on courthouse duty, rookie?" A seasoned officer called out from across the steps, a playful smirk on his face. Michael straightened his posture, determination flashing in his blue eyes. "Yes, sir. Ready to serve and protect." The older officer chuckled and moved along, leaving Michael to his post. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Today was his chance to prove himself, to show that he was more than just a fresh face on the force. As people began to arrive for the day's proceedings, Michael's attention never wavered. He watched each person carefully, his hand occasionally brushing against his holster as a subconscious reassurance. A group of young African-American men approached, laughing and chatting among themselves. Michael felt a twinge of anxiety, but reminded himself to remain professional. "Stay focused, Michael. Everyone deserves respect," he muttered under his breath. An elderly white woman struggled with her coat against the morning chill, stumbling slightly on the steps. Michael rushed forward without hesitation. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, his voice warm with concern. "Oh, thank you, officer," she replied with a grateful smile. "It's wonderful to see someone so attentive." Michael felt a surge of pride at her words. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Have a good day." As the morning progressed, more people of diverse backgrounds arrived, each interaction reinforcing Michael's sense of duty. However, beneath his composed exterior, doubts began to surface. He noticed himself lingering a bit longer on individuals who didn't fit his usual patterns, a realization that unsettled him. Unbeknownst to Michael, his subtle shifts in behavior hadn't gone unnoticed by those around him. His biases, though unintentional, were beginning to influence his interactions, setting the stage for an unexpected encounter. The morning sun climbed higher, casting a bright light over the bustling courthouse steps. Judge Evelyn Parker approached the grand entrance, her navy blue robes neatly folded over her arm. Her purposeful stride reflected her readiness to face the day's challenges. As she neared the steps, Officer Michael Blake, still vigilant at his post, noticed her from a distance. Evelyn's presence was commanding yet graceful, a testament to her years of dedicated service. Michael's eyes followed her approach, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. There was something about her demeanor that made him uneasy, though he couldn't quite place why. As Evelyn reached the courthouse doors, Michael stepped forward, his posture rigid and authoritative. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out, his voice sharper than intended. "May I see some identification, please?" Evelyn paused, slightly taken aback by the sudden request. "I'm heading into the courthouse, officer," she replied calmly, nudging towards the building. "I have important matters to attend to today." Michael's suspicion deepened. "I'm going to need to verify who you are before you enter," he stated firmly, his hand inching closer to his belt. Evelyn's brow furrowed in confusion. "I believe you know who I am. I'm Judge Evelyn Parker, presiding over today's landmark civil rights case." Michael hesitated, momentarily unsure. I wasn't informed of your role today," he admitted, though his tone remained skeptical. "I need to see some form of ID." Evelyn sighed softly, understanding his protocol but also feeling the weight of the situation. "I left my ID in my office. It's been a hectic morning preparing for the case. Please, officer, let me pass." Before Michael could respond, a small crowd began to gather around them. Murmurs spread through the onlookers as they recognized Evelyn Parker, their respect for her evident in their expressions. A middle-aged woman stepped forward hesitantly. "Officer, I'm sure Judge Parker is here for the case. She's well known in our community." Michael glanced around, seeing the supportive faces but still struggling with his internal conflict. I'm sorry, Judge Parker, but without proper ID, I can't let you in," he insisted, though his voice wavered slightly. Evelyn maintained her composure, her eyes meeting Michael's with a mix of understanding and disappointment. "I assure you, officer, there's no misunderstanding. Please let me through." The tension in the air was palpable as more people voiced their support for Evelyn, their words adding to Michael's growing unease. Despite the pressure, he stood his ground, the protocol overriding his better judgment. As Evelyn remained steadfast, Michael's resolve began to crumble. He could feel the weight of his actions pressing down on him, the realization of his mistake dawning slowly. Before he could react further, Evelyn reached into her pocket, pulling out a small, elegant badge that glinted in the sunlight. "Officer Blake," she said softly, holding the badge up for him to see. "This is my judicial badge. I hope this clarifies any doubts." Michael's eyes widened as he took in the unmistakable emblem of her authority, his face flushed with embarrassment and regret, the color draining from his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Judge Parker," he stammered, his earlier confidence evaporating. "I didn't realize." Evelyn offered a gentle smile, her demeanor remaining composed despite the public embarrassment. "It's all right, officer. Mistakes happen. Please, let me through." As she passed him and entered the courthouse, the crowd's support grew louder, their approval clear. Michael stood there, humbled and ashamed, the impact of his actions sinking in deeply. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Judge Evelyn Parker took her seat at the bench. Officer Michael Blake stood near the back, his presence a stark reminder of the morning's tension. The room was filled with lawyers, plaintiffs, defendants, and curious spectators, all awaiting the day's proceedings. As the bailiff called the court to order, Evelyn's eyes briefly met Michael's. There was no anger there, only a silent acknowledgement of the earlier misunderstanding. She focused her attention back on the docket, ready to guide the day's important cases. "Good morning, everyone," Judge Parker began, her voice steady and authoritative. "Let's proceed with the first case of the day." The clerk introduced the case. The State versus Lisa Thompson. A middle-aged woman stood nervously at the defendant's table, accused of embezzlement from her employer, a local nonprofit organization. The prosecutor presented the evidence, including financial records and testimonies from colleagues. Lisa's defense attorney, a compassionate woman named Rachel Green, stood to address the court. "Your Honor, my client has been a dedicated employee for over a decade. These allegations are a misunderstanding, and we intend to prove her innocence today." As the proceedings unfolded, Evelyn listened intently, her mind focused on uncovering the truth. Meanwhile, Michael struggled to remain composed. His earlier encounter with Judge Parker weighed heavily on him, stirring a mix of guilt and reflection. During a recess, Rachel approached Evelyn's chambers to discuss the case further. "Judge Parker, I appreciate your dedication to fairness. If there's any additional information you need from me, please let me know." Evelyn nodded, grateful for Rachel's professionalism. "Thank you, Rachel. I believe we're on the right path to uncovering the truth in this case." Back in the courtroom, the defense presented their evidence highlighting inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. Lisa Thompson maintained her innocence, her voice wavering but resolute. The testimonies began to paint a different picture, casting doubt on the initial accusations. As the day progressed, Evelyn found herself reflecting on her role not just as a judge, but as a leader in her community. She thought about the importance of integrity, empathy, and the responsibility she held in ensuring justice was served without prejudice. Later that afternoon, after the case had been adjourned for the day, Michael lingered outside the courtroom, watching as people filed out. He saw Rachel and Lisa deep in conversation, offering support and encouragement. It was then that Evelyn approached him, her expression softening. "Officer Blake," she began, her tone gentle. "May I have a word?" Michael straightened, a mix of apprehension and hope in his eyes. "Of course, Your Honor." They moved to a quiet corner of the courthouse steps, away from the lingering crowd. "I wanted to apologize again for this morning," Evelyn said sincerely. "I understand how protocols can be strict, but I hope you know that your role is vital to maintaining the integrity of this courtroom." Michael looked down, his shoulders heavy with remorse. "I'm truly sorry, Judge Parker. I let my judgment cloud my duty. It's something I need to work on." Evelyn placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Recognizing that is the first step, officer. We all have biases, some more hidden than others. The important thing is that you're willing to confront and overcome them." Michael nodded, feeling a weight lift slightly from his conscience. "Thank you for your understanding. I want to be better, for myself and for the community." Evelyn smiled warmly. "I believe you will. Remember, justice isn't just about the law. It's about fairness, compassion, and continuous growth." As they stood together, a newfound sense of mutual respect formed between them. The courthouse, once a place of tension, now symbolized a path toward healing and improvement. The following morning dawned clear and bright over the bustling city. Judge Evelyn Parker arrived at the courthouse with a renewed sense of purpose, her mind reflecting on her conversation with Officer Michael Blake. She believed in second chances and the power of personal growth, hoping that Michael's acknowledgement of his mistake would lead to positive change. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was calm, yet charged with anticipation. Lawyers and court staff moved with purpose, preparing for the day's cases. Evelyn made her way to her chambers, where she briefly reviewed the schedule before stepping into her courtroom. Meanwhile, Officer Michael Blake felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The previous day's events weighed heavily on him, but Evelyn's words had ignited a desire to improve. He knew he had a long journey ahead to confront his biases and become the officer he aspired to be. As the morning proceedings began, Evelyn presided over a complex case involving workplace discrimination. The plaintiff, Maria Gonzalez, a dedicated employee, stood before the bench with her defense attorney, David Lee. The room was filled with tension as both sides presented their arguments. Officer Blake, assigned to provide security for the day, positioned himself discreetly near the entrance. He was determined to approach his duties with a newfound awareness, mindful of his previous shortcomings. His presence was calm yet vigilant, a stark contrast to his earlier demeanor. During a recess, Evelyn noticed Michael observing the proceedings attentively. She approached him with a warm smile. "Good morning, Officer Blake. How are you feeling today?" Michael looked up, meeting her gaze with sincerity. "Much better, Your Honor. I've been reflecting a lot and attending the training sessions you recommended." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "That's commendable. Growth is a continuous process. Remember, every interaction is an opportunity to practice fairness and empathy." Their conversation was interrupted as Maria took the stand, her voice steady despite the nerves. "I've worked tirelessly for this organization, and I believe I was treated unfairly because of my ethnicity." David Lee, her attorney, presented compelling evidence and witness testimonies that highlighted the discriminatory practices within the company. The prosecutor, determined to prove the company's innocence, countered with their own set of evidence, attempting to discredit Maria's claims. As the day unfolded, Evelyn navigated the courtroom with grace, ensuring that both sides were heard and that justice was served impartially. Michael observed closely, learning from Evelyn's balanced approach and commitment to equity. During a particularly intense cross-examination, Maria's colleague Janet broke down in tears, revealing the emotional toll the discrimination had taken on her. The courtroom fell silent, the gravity of Janet's testimony resonating deeply with everyone present. Evelyn took a moment to compose herself before addressing the court. "Thank you, Janet, for your honesty. It's important that we acknowledge the human impact of these actions." After a long day of deliberations, Evelyn retired to her chambers to deliberate on the case. Michael, feeling the weight of responsibility, stayed behind to assist with the final security measures. "Judge Parker," Michael began hesitantly, "I wanted to let you know that I've been attending the diversity workshops and have been working on understanding my own biases." Evelyn looked up, her eyes reflecting pride and encouragement. "I'm glad to hear that, Michael. It's a significant step towards becoming a better officer and a more compassionate individual." She offered a reassuring smile. "Keep up the good work. Change begins with self-awareness and the willingness to learn." As Evelyn delivered her verdict, declaring the company liable for discriminatory practices and ordering restitution for Maria, a sense of relief and justice filled the courtroom. The decision was a victory not just for Maria, but for the principles Evelyn stood for. After the proceedings, Evelyn and Michael shared a quiet moment outside the courtroom. "Today was a good day," Evelyn remarked. Michael nodded, a genuine smile forming. "It was. Thank you for believing in me." Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, Michael, every day is an opportunity to make things right. I'm proud of the progress you've made." As they parted ways, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. He was committed to continuing his journey of self-improvement, inspired by Judge Parker's unwavering dedication to justice and fairness. The days that followed marked a period of transformation for Officer Michael Blake. Determined to overcome his past mistakes, Michael immersed himself in the diversity workshops recommended by Judge Evelyn Parker. Each session opened his eyes to the subtle biases that had unknowingly influenced his behavior, challenging him to rethink his approach to policing and community engagement. One afternoon, as Michael walked through a local community center, he noticed a group of women gathered for a support group meeting. Curious and eager to connect, he approached the organizer, a warm-hearted woman named Linda Thompson. "Hi, I'm Officer Blake," he introduced himself, extending a hand. I recently started attending these workshops and wanted to understand more about the community's needs. Linda smiled, shaking his hand firmly. It's great to see officers taking an interest. Please join us. Michael sat down, listening as the women shared their experiences and challenges. Their stories were filled with resilience and strength, qualities that resonated deeply with him. He realized that building trust required more than just enforcing laws. It required genuine connections and understanding. As weeks turned into months, Michael's efforts began to bear fruit. He participated in community events, volunteered at local shelters, and even organized neighborhood cleanups. His presence became a symbol of change, embodying the very principles he was striving to uphold. One evening, Michael received an invitation to a community dinner hosted by Linda. The event was a celebration of unity and collaboration, bringing together residents and local officials. As he mingled with the attendees, Michael felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced before. During the dinner, Linda approached him with a thoughtful expression. "You've made significant strides, Michael. Your dedication is inspiring." Michael nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you, Linda. I've learned so much from everyone here." Just then, Judge Evelyn Parker entered the room, her presence commanding, yet approachable. She made her way over to Michael, extending her hand warmly. "Officer Blake, it's wonderful to see you here." "Judge Parker," Michael replied sincerely, shaking her hand. "Thank you for all your guidance." Evelyn smiled. "You've come a long way. It's heartening to see your commitment to making a positive impact." As the evening progressed, conversations flowed freely, and bonds were strengthened. Michael found himself surrounded by individuals who shared his vision for a more just and compassionate community. He realized that true change was a collective effort, built on mutual respect and understanding. Later that night, as Michael reflected on the day's events, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had not only begun to mend his own perspectives, but had also contributed to fostering a more inclusive environment for others. The journey was far from over, but with each step, he moved closer to embodying the justice he had always aspired to uphold. Weeks had passed since Officer Michael Blake began his journey of self-improvement. The transformation in his demeanor was noticeable to everyone in the community, but one person still grappled with lingering emotions: Evelyn Parker's former colleague, Detective Laura Simmons. Detective Simmons had worked closely with Evelyn for over a decade, tackling some of the toughest cases in the precinct. Their professional relationship was built on mutual respect and shared values. However, the incident with Officer Blake had stirred old memories and unspoken tensions within Laura. One crisp autumn morning, Evelyn received a call from Detective Simmons requesting a meeting. Curious and slightly concerned, she agreed to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. As Evelyn entered the cozy establishment, she spotted Laura sitting by the window, her expression guarded. Evelyn approached her table and offered a warm smile. "Laura, it's good to see you. Please have a seat." Laura nodded, her eyes briefly meeting Evelyn's before looking away. "Thank you for meeting with me, Evelyn." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Laura took a deep breath. "I've been hearing about the changes with Officer Blake. I'm proud of the progress he's making, but I can't help feeling conflicted about everything that happened." Evelyn leaned forward, her demeanor empathetic. "I understand. It's been a challenging time for all of us. What specifically is on your mind?" Laura hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Back when I was in your position, I made mistakes too. Mistakes that affected not just my career, but also the people I cared about. Seeing Officer Blake go through this reminds me of my own past actions and the impact they've had." Evelyn reached out, placing a comforting hand on Laura's. "We all have our moments of weakness, Laura. What matters is how we choose to move forward and make amends." Laura sighed, a mixture of relief and sorrow in her eyes. "I admire how you're handling everything. Your strength and dedication have inspired me to confront my own shortcomings." Evelyn squeezed her hand gently. It's never too late to seek forgiveness and strive for better. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. Laura nodded, a faint smile breaking through her reserved exterior. Thank you, Evelyn. Your support means a lot. Meanwhile, Officer Michael Blake continued to immerse himself in community activities, his efforts bridging gaps between the police force and the residents they served. His genuine approach began to dismantle the barriers that once seemed insurmountable. One afternoon, Michael organized a town hall meeting at the local community center, inviting residents to voice their concerns and suggestions. The turnout was impressive, reflecting the community's eagerness to engage and collaborate. As the meeting commenced, Michael stood before the crowd, his voice steady and sincere. Thank you all for coming. Today is about listening and working together to build a safer, more inclusive community for everyone. A middle-aged woman named Gloria raised her hand, her demeanor both assertive and kind. Officer Blake, I've noticed a significant improvement in how you interact with us. It gives me hope that positive change is possible. Michael smiled appreciatively. Thank you, Gloria. Your feedback is invaluable. We're all in this together, and your input helps us serve you better. As the meeting progressed, various topics were discussed, from neighborhood safety to community events. The atmosphere was one of collaboration and mutual respect, a stark contrast to the tension that once permeated these discussions. After the meeting, Evelyn attended the event, observing Michael's interactions with the community. She felt a sense of pride, knowing that her influence had played a part in his transformation. Approaching Michael, she offered a supportive nod. You've done well today, Michael. He returned the gesture with gratitude. Thank you, Judge Parker. Your guidance has been instrumental in this journey. Evelyn placed a hand on his shoulder. Keep up the good work. You're making a real difference. Detective Laura Simmons took Evelyn's advice to heart, deciding to seek additional training and mentorship to address her past mistakes. She reached out to Evelyn for guidance, eager to rebuild her professional reputation and personal integrity. One evening, Laura and Evelyn met for dinner at a quiet restaurant. The conversation was candid and heartfelt, delving into the challenges of overcoming past actions and the importance of continuous personal growth. I've started attending counseling sessions, Laura admitted, her voice tinged with vulnerability. It's been difficult, but I feel like I'm finally addressing the root of my issues. Evelyn listened attentively, her support unwavering. That's a brave and commendable step, Laura. Healing takes time, but every effort you make brings you closer to the peace you deserve. As their friendship deepened, Evelyn and Laura collaborated on initiatives aimed at fostering a more inclusive and understanding police force. Their combined experiences and insights created a foundation for meaningful change within the department. Back at the precinct, Officer Blake continued to embody the principles of fairness and empathy. His relationship with Evelyn had grown into a mentorship, guiding him through the complexities of his role and the nuances of community policing. One morning, as Michael prepared for his duties, Evelyn approached him with a thoughtful expression. Michael, there's an upcoming workshop on advanced community engagement strategies. I believe it would be beneficial for you to attend. Michael nodded eagerly. I'd appreciate that, Judge Parker. Thank you for the opportunity. Evelyn smiled. It's a chance to further enhance your skills and continue the positive momentum you've built. I'll arrange for you to participate. As the months passed, the precinct underwent a transformation. The initiatives spearheaded by Evelyn, Laura, and Michael fostered a culture of inclusivity and mutual respect. Officers were encouraged to engage with the community, listen to their concerns, and collaborate on solutions. One sunny afternoon, the precinct hosted a community fair, complete with food stalls, games, and informational booths. Families from all walks of life attended, enjoying the festivities and engaging with local law enforcement in a relaxed setting. Evelyn watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. Officer Blake moved through the crowd with ease, his interactions genuine and heartfelt. Laura assisted with organizing the event, her presence a testament to her resilience and commitment to change. As the day drew to a close, Evelyn gathered the team for a moment of reflection. Today has been a wonderful example of what we can achieve when we work together. Thank you all for your dedication and hard work." Michael stepped forward, his voice filled with gratitude. "None of this would have been possible without your leadership, Evelyn. You've shown us the true meaning of justice and community." Laura added, "We've all come a long way and there's still more to do. But today is a step in the right direction." Evelyn nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Indeed, it is. Let's continue to build on this foundation and strive for a future where justice is truly for everyone." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the precinct, the team felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced their past, embraced change, and forged a path toward a more just and compassionate community. The tension in the courtroom was thick, almost tangible. Officer Michael Blake stood near the entrance, feeling the weight of the moment settle heavily on his shoulders. He had never felt so acutely aware of the importance of fair and unbiased justice. As he watched Judge Evelyn Parker meticulously consider each word spoken, her demeanor remained calm and thoughtful, embodying the very essence of impartiality. As the proceedings continued, Blake found himself increasingly engrossed in the case. He listened attentively to the testimonies, observed the jury's reactions, and admired Judge Parker's masterful handling of the courtroom dynamics. Despite his earlier mistake, he couldn't help but develop a growing respect for her professionalism and wisdom. Throughout the morning, Blake's focus sharpened. He began to see beyond his own guilt and truly grasp the gravity of his role within the justice system. Every decision, every action he took could have profound consequences on people's lives. Standing there, witnessing justice in action, Blake realized that this experience was more than just a punishment or a lesson. It was an opportunity for personal growth, a chance to view the world through a different, more compassionate lens. As he watched Judge Parker preside over the case with grace and fairness, Blake knew he had a long way to go, but he was determined to learn. The trial unfolded with intricate layers, and Blake found himself drawn deeper into the proceedings. He observed as Judge Parker navigated the complex web of testimonies and evidence with remarkable skill and patience. The prosecution presented their case, heavily relying on witness statements and security footage. However, as Judge Parker began to question the witnesses, cracks in their testimonies began to surface. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Parker addressed one of the store's security guards, "you stated that you saw Ms. Ramirez leaving the store with unpaid merchandise. Can you describe exactly what you observed?" The guard shifted uncomfortably, his confidence wavering. "Well, Your Honor, I saw a young Hispanic woman exiting the store quickly. She looked suspicious." Judge Parker's eyebrow arched slightly. "And what specifically made her appear suspicious to you?" The guard stumbled over his words, uncertainty creeping into his voice. She didn't seem like she belonged there, if you know what I mean." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Blake felt a familiar knot form in his stomach as he recognized the same bias he had displayed earlier that day. As the trial progressed, Judge Parker methodically exposed the flaws in the prosecution's case. Upon closer inspection, the security footage was grainy and inconclusive. The witness statements were vague and riddled with assumptions. Blake watched in awe as Judge Parker turned her attention directly to the defendant. "Ms. Ramirez, can you please tell the court where you were on the day in question?" Nina Ramirez's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "I was at the store, Your Honor. I was shopping for a gift for my sister's birthday, but I didn't take anything. I left because I felt uncomfortable with how the staff was watching me." Judge Parker nodded, her expression compassionate, yet neutral. "Thank you, Ms. Ramirez." As the hours passed, Blake couldn't help but draw parallels between Nina's case and his own encounter with Judge Parker. He realized with growing discomfort how easily he had jumped to conclusions based solely on appearance. The weight of his earlier actions pressed heavily on his conscience. As the courtroom settled after the verdict, Judge Evelyn Parker took a deep breath. Her eyes swept across the room, taking in the faces of those present, the relieved defendant, the stunned prosecutors, and the attentive spectators. Her gaze lingered for a moment on Officer Blake, who stood rigidly at attention near the door. "Before we conclude today's proceedings," Judge Parker began, her voice calm yet resonant, "I feel compelled to address the broader implications of this case." The courtroom fell silent, all eyes fixed on the judge. What we've witnessed here today is not just about one individual. It's a stark reminder of the pervasive issues that continue to plague our justice system. Judge Parker continued, her words measured and clear. Racial profiling and discrimination have no place in a society that claims to value justice and equality. Blake felt his chest tighten as Judge Parker's words struck a chord deep within him. He found himself hanging on every word, unable to look away. Ms. Ramirez was subjected to suspicion, arrest, and prosecution based largely on assumptions tied to her ethnicity. This is not justice. This is the very antithesis of what our legal system should represent, Judge Parker declared, her voice gaining strength. She turned her attention to the prosecution table. "To my colleagues in the legal profession, I implore you to examine your practices critically. We must be vigilant against allowing biases, conscious or unconscious, to influence our judgment and actions. The consequences of such biases, as we've seen today, can be devastating to innocent individuals and corrosive to the public's trust in our institutions." Blake felt a wave of shame wash over him. He saw his own actions from that morning reflected in the case before him. The realization of how quickly he had judged Judge Parker based solely on her appearance hit him with renewed force. Judge Parker's voice softened slightly, but her words remained powerful. "To Ms. Ramirez, I extend my deepest apologies on behalf of the system that has failed you. Your innocence was never in question. It was our own prejudices that were on trial today." Nina Ramirez, seated at the defendant's table, wiped away a tear, nodding in gratitude. "Let this case serve as a wake-up call," Judge Parker continued, her gaze sweeping the courtroom once more. "We must do better. We must be better. The pursuit of true justice demands nothing less from each of us." As Judge Parker concluded her statement, a profound silence fell over the courtroom. The weight of her words hung in the air, challenging everyone present to reflect on their own biases and actions. Blake stood motionless, feeling as though Judge Parker's words had been directed specifically at him. The parallels between his earlier behavior and the injustice Nina had faced were undeniable. He felt a mix of shame and a growing determination to confront his own biases head-on. Judge Parker's voice cut through Blake's thoughts. "In light of the evidence presented, or rather the lack thereof, I find that there is insufficient cause to proceed with this case. Ms. Ramirez, you are free to go. Case dismissed." The courtroom erupted in a mix of reactions. Nina's family embraced her, tears of relief streaming down their faces. The prosecutors looked stunned, shuffling their papers in disbelief. Blake stood rooted to his spot, his mind reeling. He had just witnessed firsthand how racial profiling and hasty judgments could have devastating consequences. The parallels between Nina's case and his own actions that morning were undeniable. He felt a deep sense of shame, but also a glimmer of something else, a determination to do better, to be better. As the courtroom emptied, Officer Blake stumbled out into the hallway, his mind swirling with conflicting emotions. The weight of Judge Parker's words pressed down on him, making each step feel heavy and uncertain. He found a quiet corner and leaned against the wall, closing his eyes as the events of the day replayed in his mind. The image of Judge Parker approaching the courthouse that morning flashed before him. Blake saw himself through new eyes, not as the dutiful officer he thought he was, but as someone whose actions were fueled by prejudice and assumptions. He remembered the hostility in his voice, the suspicion in his eyes, all directed at a woman who had done nothing wrong. "What was I thinking?" Blake muttered to himself, shaking his head in disbelief. As he stood there, the parallels between his actions and Nina Ramirez's case became painfully clear. Both situations stemmed from the same root, snap judgments based on race. The realization hit Blake like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless. He thought about how quickly he had dismissed Judge Parker's explanation, how readily he had assumed she didn't belong. It was the same bias that had led to Nina's arrest and near conviction. Blake felt a wave of shame wash over him. "I'm no better than those officers who arrested Nina," he whispered, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. His mind raced as he began to see his actions as part of a larger pattern. It wasn't just about this one incident. It was about a whole system of biases and assumptions that he had been blind to. He realized that his eagerness to prove himself as an officer had blinded him to his own prejudices. As he stood there grappling with these uncomfortable truths, Blake knew he couldn't ignore this revelation. He had to confront his biases head-on, no matter how difficult it might be. The image of Judge Parker's calm dignity in the face of his hostility haunted him, serving as both a rebuke and an inspiration. "I have to do better," Blake said firmly, straightening up. "I have to be better." The next day, Blake sat at his desk, staring at the formal notice in his hands. The words flagged for review seemed to jump off the page, making his stomach churn. He had known this was coming, but seeing it in black and white made it all too real. "Officer Blake," a voice called out. He looked up to see his supervisor, Captain Johnson, standing in the doorway. "Got a minute?" Blake nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, sir." Captain Johnson entered the office and closed the door behind him. He took a seat across from Blake, his expression a mix of concern and disappointment. "I'm sure you know why I'm here," the captain began. "Your actions outside the courthouse have raised some serious concerns." Blake nodded, unable to meet his supervisor's eyes. "I understand, sir." "Look, Blake." Captain Johnson leaned forward, his tone softening slightly. "You're a good officer with potential, but what happened yesterday, it can't be ignored." Blake felt a lump forming in his throat. "Am I being suspended?" The captain shook his head. "Not yet. We're offering you an alternative." He slid a brochure across the desk. "There's an anti-bias training program starting next week. If you agree to attend, we can hold off on any disciplinary action for now." Blake picked up the brochure, his mind racing. Part of him felt defensive, wanting to argue that he didn't need this. But the memory of Judge Parker's face and the realization of his own prejudices stopped him short. I don't know what to say," Blake admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Captain Johnson's expression softened further. "You don't have to decide right now, but Blake, I want you to really think about this. It's an opportunity to grow, to become a better officer." As the captain stood to leave, Blake found himself at a crossroads. The training program felt like an admission of guilt, a public acknowledgement of his failings. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this might be exactly what he needed. "What if—" Blake started, then hesitated. "What if I go through the training and nothing changes?" Captain Johnson paused at the door. "Then at least you'll know you tried." "But Blake, change only happens when we're open to it. The question is, are you ready to open your mind?" With that, the captain left, leaving Blake alone with his thoughts. He looked down at the brochure again, feeling a mix of fear and hope. This could be a chance to confront his biases head-on, to become the officer he always thought he was. But it wouldn't be easy. Blake knew he'd have to face some uncomfortable truths about himself. The thought made him nervous, but also strangely determined. As he sat there weighing his options, Blake realized that this decision could shape the rest of his career, and more importantly, the kind of person he wanted to be. Blake sat at his desk, the brochure for the anti-bias training program lying open before him. His fingers drummed nervously on the desk as he wrestled with his decision. The weight of his actions outside the courthouse pressed heavily on his conscience, and he knew that this choice could define his future as a police officer. With a deep breath, Blake picked up his phone and dialed the number on the brochure. "Hello?" he said, his voice wavering slightly. "This is Officer Blake. I'd like to sign up for the anti-bias training program." As he hung up the phone, a mix of relief and apprehension washed over him. He had taken the first step, but the journey ahead seemed daunting. Across town, in her chambers, Judge Evelyn Parker was reviewing case files when her phone rang. She answered it, her eyebrows raising in surprise as she listened to the caller. "You want me to lead the anti-bias training program?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of honor and responsibility. The voice on the other end explained that her reputation for fairness and her recent experience with Officer Blake made her the ideal candidate to lead the training. Marita sat back in her chair, considering the offer. She thought about the young officer who had confronted her and how this could be an opportunity to make a real difference in the department. "I would be honored to lead the training," Parker said, her voice firm with conviction. "Thank you for considering me." As she hung up the phone, Parker felt a sense of purpose wash over her. This was a chance to address systemic issues head-on, to help officers like Blake understand the impact of their biases. She began to jot down ideas for the training, drawing from her years of experience in the justice system. Parker knew that this wouldn't be an easy task, but she was determined to create a program that would challenge officers to confront their prejudices and grow. As the day of the training approached, both Blake and Parker prepared themselves for what lay ahead. Blake felt a mix of nervousness and determination, knowing that this could be a turning point in his career and personal growth. Parker, on the other hand, felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, understanding the importance of the task before her. Little did they know that their paths were about to intersect once again, in a way that would profoundly impact them both. On the morning of the anti-bias training, Officer Blake walked into the conference room with hesitant steps. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the faces of his fellow officers. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto a familiar figure at the front of the room. Judge Evelyn Parker stood there, calm and poised, preparing her materials for the training. Blake's heart raced. He hadn't expected to see her here, and the memory of their encounter outside the courthouse flooded back. He considered turning around and leaving, but something kept him rooted to the spot. Judge Parker looked up, her eyes meeting Blake's. For a moment, Blake held his breath, unsure of how she would react. To his surprise, Parker's face softened into a gentle smile. She walked over to him, her steps measured and graceful. "Officer Blake," she said, her voice warm and free of judgment. "I'm glad to see you here today." Blake swallowed hard, struggling to find his voice. "Judge Parker, I didn't know you'd be leading the training." Parker nodded, her eyes kind. "This is an important step for all of us. I hope we can learn and grow together today." As the training began, Parker's calm demeanor put the room at ease. She started by explaining the concept of implicit bias using simple examples that resonated with the officers. "We all have biases," she explained, her voice clear and steady. "The key is recognizing them and understanding how they affect our actions." Blake listened intently, his mind racing as he began to see his own experiences in a new light. When Parker spoke about systemic racism, he felt a twinge of discomfort, but he forced himself to keep an open mind. As the session progressed, Blake found himself becoming more engaged. He started to raise his hand, asking questions and sharing his thoughts. Each time, Parker responded with patience and insight, guiding the conversation without judgment. During a group exercise, Blake found himself paired with Officer Maria Lopez, a Black female officer. As they discussed their experiences, Blake felt a shift in his perspective. He began to understand the weight of everyday discrimination that his colleague faced. "I never realized," Blake said softly, more to himself than to his partner, "how much of an impact these biases have on people's lives." Parker, overhearing his comment, gave him an encouraging nod. Blake felt a glimmer of hope. He knew he had a long way to go, but for the first time, he was truly ready to change. As the training session came to a close, Blake felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him. His heart raced as he watched Parker gathering her materials at the front of the room. He knew he had to speak with her to express his gratitude, but the thought of facing her again made his palms sweat. Taking a deep breath, Blake slowly made his way through the crowd of dispersing officers. He approached Parker with hesitant steps, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Judge Parker?" he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Parker turned to face him, her expression calm and open. "Yes, Officer Blake?" Blake swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "I wanted to thank you for the training today. It was really eye-opening." Parker smiled gently, recognizing the change in Blake's demeanor. The defensive, confrontational officer she had encountered outside the courthouse seemed to have vanished. In his place stood a man who appeared humbled and genuinely affected by what he had learned. "I'm glad you found it helpful," Parker replied warmly. "It's more than helpful. It's life-changing." Blake nodded, his eyes finally meeting hers. "I want you to know that the incident with you outside the courthouse changed my perspective. I've learned so much about justice and equality, not just today, but since that moment." Parker's smile widened, her eyes filled with understanding. "That's wonderful to hear, Officer Blake. Growth and change are never easy, but they're always worth it." Blake felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had been so afraid of Parker's judgment, but instead he found only kindness and encouragement. "I know I have a long way to go," Blake admitted, his voice stronger now. "But I'm committed to doing better, to being better. Thank you for giving me that chance." In the weeks following the anti-bias training, Blake found himself viewing the world through a new lens. Every interaction, every decision, became an opportunity for self-reflection. He began to notice the subtle ways his biases had influenced his behavior, and he made a conscious effort to correct them. One afternoon, Blake was assigned to patrol a neighborhood known for its diverse population. As he walked through the community park, he noticed a group of teenagers gathered around a basketball hoop, laughing and playing. In the past, Blake might have approached them with suspicion, but today was different. He approached with a friendly smile. "Hey there, guys. Mind if I join in?" The teenagers looked up, surprised but welcoming. "Sure, Officer Blake. Grab a ball," one of them replied. As they played, Blake engaged in casual conversation, genuinely interested in their lives and interests. He realized that building trust required more than just enforcing laws. It required genuine connections and understanding. Later that day, Blake encountered an elderly woman struggling with her groceries at the local market. Remembering his training, he approached her calmly and offered assistance. "Can I help you with those, ma'am?" The woman smiled gratefully. "Oh, thank you, dear. That's very kind of you." Blake felt a sense of fulfillment as he helped her carry the bags to her car. Each positive interaction reinforced his commitment to change, reminding him of the impact one person could make. Back at the precinct, Detective Laura Simmons was making strides in her own journey of self-improvement. Inspired by her recent conversations with Judge Parker, Laura had taken additional steps to address her past mistakes. She attended counseling sessions and participated in workshops aimed at fostering empathy and understanding. One afternoon, Laura found herself in Judge Parker's office discussing the progress they had both made. "Evelyn, I wanted to thank you for your support," Laura began, her voice sincere. "I've been working hard to overcome my past actions, and it's been challenging but rewarding." Judge Parker smiled warmly. "You're doing great, Laura. Acknowledging your mistakes and taking steps to address them is a significant achievement. Remember, it's a continuous process." Laura nodded, feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. "I still have a long way to go, but I feel more hopeful about the future." As they spoke, Parker reflected on the positive changes she had witnessed in both Blake and Laura. It was a testament to the power of mentorship and the importance of fostering an environment where individuals felt supported in their journey toward personal growth. One brisk autumn morning, the precinct received a call about a potential domestic disturbance at a nearby residence. Officer Blake was assigned to respond, accompanied by his partner, Officer Lisa Ramirez. As they arrived at the scene, Blake felt a mix of anticipation and determination. Inside the home, a heated argument was taking place between a couple. The tension in the room was thick, and the air felt heavy with emotion. Ma'am, sir, Blake began calmly, stepping into the room with Lisa by his side. We're here to help. Can you please tell us what's going on? The woman, visibly upset, glared at Blake before taking a deep breath. It's my husband. He just lost his job, and things have been tough lately. I'm worried he might do something drastic. Blake approached her with empathy, remembering the importance of understanding and patience. I understand this is a difficult time. Let's work together to find a solution. Is there someone else you can reach out to for support? The man, pacing nervously, looked at Blake and Lisa with a mixture of frustration and fear. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm failing my family. Blake nodded, placing a reassuring hand on the man's shoulder. You're not alone in this. Let's sit down and talk about how we can help you both through this tough period. As they engaged in a constructive conversation, Blake noticed the man's tension begin to ease. The situation, once volatile, became more manageable through calm dialogue and genuine concern. After ensuring that both individuals were safe and connected them with local support services, Blake and Lisa left the residence with a sense of accomplishment. The successful resolution of the incident reinforced Blake's belief in the power of empathy and effective communication. As they engaged in a constructive conversation, Blake noticed the man's tension begin to ease. The situation, once volatile, became more manageable through calm dialogue and genuine concern. After ensuring that both individuals were safe and connected them with local support services, Blake and Lisa left the residence with a sense of accomplishment. The successful resolution of the incident reinforced Blake's belief in the power of empathy and effective communication. Later that evening, Blake returned to his desk reflecting on the day's events. He pulled out his journal, a habit he had developed to document his journey of self-improvement. Writing had become a therapeutic outlet, allowing him to process his thoughts and experiences. Today was a good day, Blake wrote, a small smile forming on his face. I felt more connected with the community and was able to help resolve a tense situation peacefully. It's moments like these that remind me why I chose this profession. As he penned his thoughts, his phone buzzed with a message from Detective Simmons. Great job today, Michael. Keep up the good work. Blake felt a surge of gratitude. Their paths had intertwined in meaningful ways, each contributing to the other's growth and healing. The following week, the precinct organized a community outreach event, aiming to strengthen the bond between law enforcement and residents. Judge Evelyn Parker and Detective Laura Simmons were invited to speak, sharing their experiences and the importance of understanding and empathy in the justice system. Blake took the opportunity to assist in organizing the event, eager to contribute to the positive atmosphere. As the day arrived, the community center buzzed with activity. Families enjoyed games, food stalls offered a variety of treats, and informational booths provided resources on safety and support services. Judge Parker stood before the gathered crowd, her presence commanding yet approachable. Thank you all for coming today. Our goal is to build trust and foster a sense of unity within our community. Together, we can create a safer and more understanding environment for everyone. Detective Simmons followed, sharing her own journey of growth and the importance of addressing personal biases. Her words resonated deeply with many, inspiring others to reflect on their own actions and attitudes. Officer Blake, observing the event, felt a profound sense of pride. He had come a long way since that fateful day outside the courthouse, and seeing the positive impact of their collective efforts reinforced his commitment to change. As the event concluded, Parker approached Blake, her eyes filled with pride. You've done exceptionally well, Michael. Your dedication is making a real difference. Blake smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment. Thank you, Judge Parker. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. Parker placed a hand on his shoulder. Remember, this is just the beginning. Continue to embrace growth and lead by example. You're an inspiration to us all. Blake nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. I will, Evelyn. Thank you. Months passed, and the precinct continued to evolve into a model of community-oriented policing. The initiatives led by Parker, Simmons, and Blake fostered an environment of mutual respect and collaboration. Officers were encouraged to engage with residents, listen to their concerns, and work together to address community issues. One bright spring morning, Blake was assigned to lead a new team focused on neighborhood outreach. As he gathered his team for the first meeting, he felt a surge of confidence and optimism. "Good morning, everyone," Blake began, addressing his team with enthusiasm. "Our mission is to build stronger relationships within our community. By working together and understanding each other's perspectives, we can create a safer and more harmonious environment for all." His team listened attentively, inspired by Blake's passion and commitment. Under his leadership, they embarked on various projects, from organizing neighborhood cleanups to hosting educational workshops on safety and conflict resolution. During one such workshop, Blake shared his personal journey, hoping to inspire others to embrace change and strive for personal growth. "I've learned that true justice isn't just about enforcing laws. It's about understanding, empathy, and continuous self-improvement. We all have the power to make a positive impact." The attendees nodded in agreement, feeling motivated by Blake's honesty and dedication. His story served as a powerful reminder of the importance of confronting one's biases and striving for a more just and compassionate community. As the precinct celebrated the success of their outreach programs, Parker and Simmons stood alongside Blake, proud of the progress they had made together. "Here's to a brighter future," Parker toasted, raising her glass. Blake joined in, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and hope. "To justice, equality, and the power of change." As they clinked glasses, the team looked forward to the future with confidence, knowing that their collective efforts were paving the way for a more inclusive and understanding society.